I'm going to give a little tour of my new Dunkirk boiler installation. Here you see from the distance the exhaust pipe, the header going down to the Hartford loop, the boiler drain, the drain for the returns that's going off to a hose. All the other drains I take into buckets. This is the skimmer that's on the side of the boiler that I use to skim any sediment off the top, oils that are floating there. The in-feed water comes in down here at the base of the Hartford loop. We also have a cap to drain any sediment that collects in the Hartford loop. This is the boiler drain. When I have the Hartford loop valve closed, I can use this to drain just the boiler, to skim sediment off the bottom of the boiler. You can see in the Hartford loop we have a valve there, so I can close that off, separate the boiler from the returns. This is a Dunkirk boiler, as I said. It's a P5 or PSB-7D boiler. On this side you can see the controls, the 24-volt transformer, the Honeywell pressure control that came with the boiler, as well as the cycle guard low water cutoff. And the gas feed cut off for that. This water is getting kind of low in here because I'm actually flushing the system right now. So I have the Hartford loop closed off so that all the steam that's being made is coming out through the radiators, back out through the dry and wet return, so I can wash sediment out of the system. Here you can get a view of the header coming off of the boiler. The vapor stat that we're actually using to control it with, we're just using the pressure control as a backup overpressure system to cut off. It's not actually functioning. And over here is the only piece of near boiler piping that I think doesn't follow what everybody suggests to do. The old boiler came up to a bullhead T going off into two branches, a north branch and a south branch of the main. We kept that intact when we were putting the boiler in because I think we weren't smart enough to know any different. We're trying to decide whether it's worth repiping that or whether we can live with it the way it is. That's one of the big questions that I have. The two mains, the south main going off this way is 70 feet long. It's 2.5-inch pipe for most of its length. It goes down to 2-inch at some point. The one coming off to the north is 60 feet long. That's also 2.5-inch pipe the whole way to the end. Just to show the rest of the system, this is the end of the south steam main. Comes to an eccentric drop-off. This starts off as a dry return. We've added this vent because steam was coming down to the end very slowly. It was taking 15 or 16 minutes for this pipe, once the boiler had started to steam with about 4 ounces of pressure, before this got hot. Now by putting this vent in here, that time has dropped down to about 8 minutes. I'm still not sure that's quite what we expect. We may need to do more venting. This wet return continues on through our laundry room and drops down after it passes the breakers and comes down and becomes part of a wet return down here, which we've added a valve so that that can be flushed. And then that continues on into this little bathroom as a low return joins up with another pipe that's dropping down off of the north main. So that becomes the wet return and continues on back to the boiler. I drew a line, used my laser level to figure out a line of where the normal water level is relative to this wet return. And we can see it's about 5 to 6 inches above the wet return at this end. If the boiler ever goes to where the low water cutoff turns on, then this wet return is only about an inch above or an inch below the water level. I don't know whether that's a good situation or not, but that's what it is. I think this boiler got put in at a little bit lower water line level than the one it's replacing. Again, we weren't smart enough to pay attention to that when we started. The wet return we were just looking at continues on for about 50 feet, continuing to drop, and by the time it gets back to the boiler, it comes in here and drops down to the bottom of the Hartford loop, and at that point it's well below the water line of the boiler, whether it's at normal water line or even low. So we never get any steam back this way, but we don't wind up with much head if the water level gets too low in the boiler. So here I have the Hartford loop closed so that the water isn't draining from the boiler into the return, and I have the wet return drain open, and that's going across a hose over to a little bucket that I can catch it in with a tip on its side like this. When the bucket fills and starts overflowing into my drain here, there's about a gallon of water, and when the boiler gets steaming well, that goes for about almost 1 gallon per minute that's coming back from the radiators, a little less than that, maybe 0.8 gallons per minute. When I was first flushing the system, I was getting a lot of dark sediment coming out of this. Now it's coming back fairly clear, so I think that the system's starting to get itself flushed out. When we first open this drain after it's been running for a couple of days, the water does still come out kind of murky looking, but I think that's starting to get better and better, and pretty soon we'll have that taken care of. So even after all the skimming I've been doing, and the water is very clear, it's not doing a whole lot of bouncing up and down, but I'm still getting water occasionally running out through the into the top of the sight glass from the boiler. And since I don't really know how much bouncing to expect, I don't know whether this is normal or still excessive. Maybe seeing a slight drop in the water level here because I am still flushing the system, but this basic behavior of the sight glass is pretty much what I'm seeing these days. When it started off, it was bouncing almost from the top of the sight glass to almost the bottom of it in fairly rapid amounts, but the skimming and the vents at the end of the main seem to have reduced that as a problem. And here, just while that's going on, I'll show you what the temperature or the pressure gauge is doing. So it's looking reasonably steady. Depending on exactly where it is in the cycle, that runs somewhere between about 3 psi and 10 psi. It almost never cuts out on the vapor stat. So here, even though the vapor stat is set for 12 ounces and the gauge next to the vapor stat is saying that we're more in the 4 to 10 ounce range, you can see that the internal siphon on the boiler itself reads up around 8 pounds. It does go down to 0 eventually, but very slowly. I've heard that those are very undependable. I don't know whether it's worth trying to have that replaced or fixed or just ignore it.